Welcome to the place where your dreams will come true, Dreamside. Someone is starting to create a character. Who is it? In the game, he is welcomed, and they tell him that at the moment, Dreamside occupies the first place in the trends of games. The first place on the network and the first place in the number of players, which makes it the most famous game in all categories. This is a national game that everyone has played at least once, including idols, actors, politicians, and others. Whoever you are, you can meet players of all ages and nationalities here. And a new hero appears in the game, and writes his name for the game. At first he wanted to write his real name, but suddenly changed his mind, and called his character K. Going into the game, on channel number 0114, the game offers him to make his dreams come true. To become the number one that no one will dare to surpass, and this is the very dream of our hero. The first position in the Ritenji will be his. But suddenly a warning came about the imminent closure of the channel. K can't understand what's going on, and in front of him is a new notification that a new channel has been created under the number 0115. It was also written there that he was on that ground, but the guy still did not understand what was happening, since until recently he delivered one box. 30 minutes ago he was writing a message on his phone about express delivery, and is waiting for it at his house. K was delivering express delivery as usual and was calling the username selection button for the Dreamside 2 pre-order, when suddenly the elevator stopped and he got stuck. The emergency call button did not work, and it was impossible to get through at 911. And while he was sitting in the elevator, a notification window about the created channel appeared in front of him, which we met at the beginning. For him, the window was familiar, and he was interested in many small questions such as how it flies, is it a hologram? And at the very bottom of the window there is a button with the word confirm. The button just asks to be pressed, which K can't resist like a real nerd gamer. By clicking the button and in the next window receives the task, there is also a description immediately. This task is an escape, the difficulty is F, and in the description itself it is written that he is stuck in an elevator, which will soon be devoured by parasites, and the time to get out is 1 minute. In case of failure, death, and at this moment the report went. K panicked, not understanding what was going on and what it all meant. The parasites eating the elevator abruptly appeared behind him, and he noticed them and screamed violently. 13 seconds before the end, the task was completed and a rough sword was received as a reward. The elevator doors were ajar and a portal was visible in them. This is a portal that opens during the release of the game. Our hero is trying to think about everything and cannot understand what is happening, when suddenly a goblin jumps out of the portal with a club and attacks him. Hitting the guy with a baton, he falls and feels pain. A strip of his HP appears in front of him, which is almost at 0. Our hero decides that he needs to get out, but how can he do it, and what if he gets hit again while he escapes? Less than half of his health is left, and one more blow will be his last. Looking at the goblin who yells at him, our hero understands how small he is. The monster jumps for a second attack, but K dodges and starts running towards the stairs. But abruptly a restriction wall and an alert window appear in front of him. It turned out that he is undergoing training and passage to this zone is not available. The guy is puzzled by the fact that he cannot escape and the goblin immediately throws a club at him, but our hero manages to dodge. He does not know what to do and how to be in this situation at all. Suddenly, a message appears about how the account was linked to the phone and the rewards for disabling the server were received. K's level is not high enough for them, and changes were made, after which our hero abruptly felt calm. He doesn't understand what happened again since he didn't do anything. Is it possible that this is some kind of ability? The goblin again reminds himself of himself by shouting and approaches the guy. The guy looking at him realizes that this is an ordinary mob from an F-rank dungeon. He would have ignored it if it was happening in Dreamside. So, the chance of his losing is 0%. Goblin attacks, but K doesn't worry about it, he had the advantage from the very beginning. The goblin jumped on him and at that moment the guy began to advance, straightening his sword forward and pierced the goblin with one blow. But this is not the end. If everything is like in the game, there should be at least 5 more of them. K sees the goblins and completely pulling himself together, and with confidence that he will cope meets them. They attack him, as a result of which the conditions of the task were exceeded, all the monsters on the 13th floor were destroyed, and the guy will receive the title, Evil Killer. Now the hammerheads despise him, and he's got a bunch of tattered rags off of them. The hero begins to think about what is happening, what happened and how, concluding that this is definitely a game. But why is everything so real? He definitely didn't wear a virtual reality helmet. Thinking about it, everyone understands that he is surprisingly very calm because of the moment when he could not escape. If this is a game, he tried to call up the window of his stats, and it came out without any commands. There was a full description of him in the window. His real name was Kang So-jun and age 29. There was no occupation, as well as the characteristics of strength, dexterity, health, mana and all 5. And most importantly, there is a unique skill. Heavenly Body S. And since the player's level is low, only partial use of the skill is available. The skill, Calmness F, was also activated. But Kang Seo-jun was surprised by the fact that he has the Heavenly Body skill. Where did he get the skill that he had to earn a month of grinding last time? Is it possible that this is the reward for closing the server? Dreamside is a modern, crazy game that was incredibly popular. The reason for its failure was incredible complexity. Experienced players freaked out at ordinary beginners swearing with them, and all because of the complexity of the game. The need to write a command every time you use a spell. Therefore, many players who could not cope with the mechanics of the game threw it, and only the professionals remained. But the main reason why the game sucked was 3 lives. If you die 3 times, your character is removed. Therefore, there were few cool players and a huge difference between the rankers. Those who entered the top 12 were considered not human. Users called them gods, also known as those above the heavens. The first number of the ranked was a character under the nickname K, that is, Kang So-jun. But 5 years later, the server was turned off, and a survey appeared on the main page. And the very first question was about the skills that I wanted to transfer to Dreamside 2. There were 3 to choose. They were called rewards for disabling the server, and that was the end of the first Dreamside. But the guy did not expect that he would receive rewards for disabling the server like this. And if he only knew about it, he would have chosen a mystical subject. But he returned the 3 most important pieces and touches the stat panel to get information. But everything turns red because access is denied. He was told about the Heavenly Body, that he adapted to the battles, can use his skill partially, related skills are limited, they are automatically activated when the requirements are met. Therefore, it is not surprising that the sword naturally fell into his hand, and most importantly, he felt something that he had not felt before in the game. And the calmness from the Heavenly Body also worked. This means that he will receive the other 2 skills as a reward. But you won't be able to use them, since they are items for a later game. But it's too early to think about it since it's only the 5th level, and they are not open. Suddenly the growling started again, and the hero thought that the monster had appeared again. In the notification window, he learns about the transformation of the dungeon, the class of the dungeon training, difficulty F. The conditions are that the parasite appeared in the block 103 dungeons, the desecrated tree of physics, F. will soon be formed. Survive 5 or 6 waves during which a dungeon is created. The time limit is 10 minutes, the reward for the task will be a standard survival kit, in case of failure, death. He was reminded that he is undergoing training, and the level of monsters is adapted, after which they wish a good game. And in the depths of the dungeon, the most dangerous monster begins to be born, and the last warning appears that the boss will appear soon. The dungeon begins, and all the inhabitants of the house met monsters who started attacking them. A big panic began. The hero understands if everything is like in the game, then even more hammer goblins will appear, and then many people will die. Dungeon building is a phenomenon in which a normal zone is infected with parasites, and whole crowds of monsters appear in it. In the last part of the game there were many such cases, and many simply fell down unable to cope with it. That was the main concept of Dreamside. If the building is being underground, then those who are not a player will not be able to fight against the hammer goblins. K has cleared the 13th floor, and mobs don't come down from other floors, which means they can't leave their floors. If the hero escapes from here, he will be able to clean them up, so in order to do this, you need to get to the roof. And immediately he heard screams and requests for help, which he could not pay attention to. This building is part of the plot, it will be underground, and another building can be accessed through the roof, but what will happen to the people who will stay here? For our hero, there is only one solution that only K, a top-ranked runner, can implement. Only he alone is able to save everyone. He will stay here and arrange a raid in this dungeon. K is sure that even in training, the boss can't stand the light and hides in the basement. The only way out is to get to it in 10 minutes. This is the portal from where the monsters appear. Using the calmness skill, the guy enters the portal, and then an alert appears that he has discovered the room of a secret infected nature seed, which was in the basement parking lot. Kay imagined something like that. Although I thought that something would change in the second part of the game, however, the main change is that the action takes place in the real world. Goblins almost noticed him and jump into portals to other floors, but you can stop it if you kill the boss. Trying to find the boss, he wanders around the basement, and suddenly finds him. The monster was just huge compared to the hero. He looked powerful and wore one big and golden earring, and he held a large wooden hammer in his fist. The boss looks mighty and dangerous, and his name is Infected Nature. Kay compares him to the Hulk from the movie, but in any case, this is the boss of the dungeon, and while the land is not finished, this place has not yet become a full-fledged dungeon. In training, while the dungeon is not completed, raids are carried out using a different tactic. To use it, the guy waits until the timer drops to 1 minute. As soon as 1 minute of time comes, the mobs get a breath reduction, and Kay rushed into battle with the boss. He immediately activated the skill, Calmness, because at the last moment before the end of the dungeon, all the monsters begin to breathe harder, which gives him a chance to defeat them. The breath reduction occurs at the last minute before the dungeon is formed. The monster that became the boss stops and temporarily has difficulty breathing. A lot of players used it. A lot of people wanted to level up. Our hero wasn't sure if this applied to the current situation. First, he has to disorient small mobs. He has to choose a better place, and chooses an overturned car and jumps on it. The goblins lost him and started looking for him, after which the title, Cowardly Killer, was obtained and the rage of the goblins was increased. Because of the rage, the goblins' ability to assess the situation weakened. Equipping in advance was the right decision, the guy thinks, and there is a feeling that his nose has grown from pride. It's time to deal with the boss, who came to his senses and attacked the hero. The guy noticed how the goblin's nose was bleeding, which meant that he was moving forcibly. Before he can move again, Kay has to finish him off. Pushing off from the car, he jumps straight at the monster and cuts off the head with all his might, breaking another earring. They take us outside and show us complete chaos, and at that moment the radio turns on. Soya Yun from Good Morning greets us, after which he talks about the weather forecast for today. On the territory of most of the country, clouds and a high concentration of shallow howls are expected, as well as in densely populated cities strong wind and thick fog in the morning. Due to the high concentration of dust, the person with the radio asks people not to leave the premises and abandon non-domestic activities. He wishes health and then did not finish. The car explodes and they begin to show us how the city is on fire. A lot of noise and screams, a lot of corpses on the street and explosions everywhere. Such a morning in the country. A morning that should have been the same as any other, today passed differently. Some 10 minutes changed everything. The incident occurred around 6 in the morning, starting in Seoul, the center of Korea, and later covering the whole country in an instant. Because of this, the internet exploded, numerous posts about monsters and warnings not to go out on the streets, and everyone was sure how Dream Side 2 became a reality. Everyone denied it, but the media were convincing. Citizens who did not fully believe and were in doubt about the situation continued to watch over the internet. At this moment, we are shown a fitting room where there are 3 girls, and they discuss what is happening. No one could believe it, saying that it was graphics and that people themselves had not been there and were talking all sorts of things. And if it turned out to be true, it was like they were in a movie. But between them sat a young girl with bright yellow eyes and red hair. It was the famous idol Choi Hannah. The girl recognized the monsters that were from the game, and she was sure that it was a Dream Side. Hannah was watching a live broadcast of one guy who wanted to kill a lizard with a spear, but it didn't work out and the connection was interrupted. Idol immediately realized that the dungeon had begun, which surprised her very much. Choi Hannah is the best singer and songwriter in the country. She is called an idol. She is a worldwide star, starring in commercials, dramas, and movies. However, she, a sweet and innocent girl, has one secret. Choi Hannah's secret is that she is a Dream Side player. At this moment the manager comes in and says that all meetings are cancelled for today. They urgently return to the hostel and that everyone gather. The girl shows him the broadcast from the phone. but he takes it away because he believes that she has an addiction. She explains that the video shows a lizard man from the game Dreamside. He thinks it's all an addiction and doesn't listen to her. She loved to play so much, and became the one above the heavens. This meant she was one of the 12 that all the players were equal to. Among them, the best player to use weapons freely was the rank 12 magic shooter Clark. Even fans didn't know about her hobby, so that Choi Hannah wouldn't be recognized in the game. She used a voice filter and chose a middle-aged man as her character. No one in the country knew that Clark was the people's idol Choi Hannah. But when the game became a reality, there was no need to hide it. However, no one believed that the game had become a reality, and the manager took her phone and said that he would give it to the director from whom she could pick it up. It makes her very angry because she is covered because of this stubborn man. The world has turned upside down, but he does not understand this and hinders her, the girl thinks. She can be sent to rehabilitation. He opposes it in order to preserve her reputation, but if she continues in the same spirit, he will have no choice, he explains. Suddenly there is a tremor, and they both fall. Hannah grabs her phone and starts logging into her account to get items and abilities like in the game. After logging into her account, she is asked if she would like to equip a reward for registration, a magic revolver, to which she of course agrees. A golden revolver appears in her hands. The girl was surprised that it was real and boasted to the manager. She is so happy and can't believe that she doesn't notice the portal from which the ghoul comes out. She smiles and tells the manager to watch her. Seeing the ghoul, Hannah says that he is more vile and is going to shoot. There is a click on the revolver, but there was no shot, because synchronization with the account was not finished yet. The ghoul attacks her, and she dodges with all her might until the end of synchronization, asking the phone to hurry up. After full synchronization, he shoots the monster and defeats it. And immediately gathered to one person talking about it to the manager, and leaves him alone. He asks where she went, and in response she says that you need to see the best one who understands fighting better than the rest named K. We are returned to K and shown how he is standing over the boss's corpse, and an alert window appears in front of him. It says that the infected nature tree failed to be underground, and he successfully destroyed the F-rank monster, infected nature. The monster disappeared, but all the damage caused to the building and the blood remained. He doesn't think there will be a raid here anytime soon. And after a couple of minutes, a portal to the Maze of Choice appears in front of him. The Maze of Choice is a place where you need to go through each stage of the chosen difficulty. This is the last part of the training, where the reward will be the ability. It did not end because our hero stopped the dungeon, and returned to the beginning, which means he needs to go through it again. After entering the portal, he gets to the training map from Dreamside, and can feel the smell, temperature. He is surprised by such thoughtful settings, and 4 portals of varying complexity appear behind him. From left to right there are portals of varying complexity, starting with light, then medium and heavy, and finally a portal with the level of hell. This is the Maze of Choice, the last step of training, after which the player is awarded an ability depending on the level he has chosen. Even if the ability is the same, for passing on easy difficulty it will be F rank, on infernal difficulty it will be A rank. Normally, K would have chosen a hell of a difficulty level, but this time it's different. And another problem is that the hellish complexity is built in such a way that it cannot be passed. This was not fixed even after players complained about an error in the difficulty settings. Hellish has always been seen as an unattainable goal, but there was one player who was able to pass it. This is K himself. But he still died so many times before, and how many accounts he lost because of it. A panel of information appears and the number of players at each difficulty level. The guy is surprised by the number of players, and there are more of them. 120 are trying to pass the hellish level. The very fact that so many people are being trained means that this phenomenon is happening on a very large territory, at least in the whole of Korea or maybe all over the world. Thinking about this, K asks people not to die, but first of all he must worry about himself. As a result, he still chooses a hellish difficulty and jumps into the portal. After passing through the portal, he gets under the dome in the center of which is a statue of the goddess, and around the golems. In the window, he learns that this is level 1 difficulty hell. His task is to protect the statue of the goddess from golems in a limited space. The execution time is 5 minutes, in case of failure, death. The time limit exists only in hellish complexity, and there is nowhere to go after which the test began. K easily copes at first, thinking that it will be more difficult, but he knew that this was just the beginning. A minute later, an alert occurs that the oxygen level in the dome is decreasing, the monsters are becoming more active. Also, the reaction time of Khan Sojun has been reduced by 0.5 seconds, and the speed and strength of monsters has been increased by 5%. According to the remaining time, the player's movements become slower, and the monsters become stronger. So every 30 seconds the reaction of our hero decreased, and the speed and strength of the monsters increased. The guy must anticipate the movements of monsters and act in advance. The true horror of hellish complexity will manifest itself now. Is there any point in taking such a risk in training? Of course there is, it's all for the sake of a secret mission, which is only on a hellish complexity. And it was this task that our hero performed, which consisted of dodging for 3 minutes with hellish complexity. After completing a secret task, the secret phase opens for the hero. There are only 2 minutes left. The golems begin to gather into one big one and become a secret boss of an unknown level. For a secret task, you can get an improvement in stats, which is not available on other difficulties. The guy will receive the reward only when the phase is over. Opening the abilities panel, he realizes that he can only do one thing, but suddenly notices something on the panel that makes him happy. Suddenly he stops and removes a rough sword from his equipment, and puts on a desecrated hammer of physical damage. K turns to the golem so that he attacks for real and with all his heart smiling, having fun. They both launch an attack at the same time and their blows collide, leaving the golem without an arm. The golem swings with the second hand and our hero dodges, then immediately counterattacks, and leaves him without the second hand. This is a mob from training, so it's enough just to cut off his health, K thinks. He's aiming at the core on the golem's belly, which is its weak point, but it's too high. But in reality, it's not like in the game and he can't jump high. Therefore, he decides to lower it to the bottom by hitting his left leg and destroys it, and the golem falls. And immediately the guy strikes a strong blow to the monster's stomach and defeats him. The dome dissipates and our hero dies with relief. He is congratulated on passing the first stage of learning the complexity of hell, in the remaining 37 seconds. He coped thanks to the hammer, and in this he was very lucky. He receives rewards for completing the test. Firstly, endurance increases to A rank, and receives a huge amount of health. Secondly, some elements of the initial skill, Heavenly Body, were activated, and the skill, Dragon's Eye, was unlocked. It was for the sake of such awards that the guy chose hellish complexity, but this is only the first stage of a huge set. Even in a real dream side, he completed his training for a whole month. They rewind the time showing us how K fought at each stage and reached the last one. At the last stage, he destroys a horde of smurf monsters, seeing them all thanks to the Dragon's Eye skill. Eye of the Dragon A allows the user to see the flow of mana, which gives a huge advantage on smurfs for the guy. After the last smurf, a hidden task was completed in which it was necessary to destroy the Aura of Darkness 3 times on hellish difficulty. The hidden stage opened due to the completion of the hidden task. Smurfs unite into a hidden boss of an unknown level. It was a girl from the Smurfs' bodies and looked like their queen. She says it was stupid to wake her up, and our hero could live if he just left and pretended not to see her. His arrogance led to his death, and she promises to kill him, but Ki suddenly disappeared and appeared in front of her and defeats her with one blow. But it wasn't her real body, and her dark aura was going away, saying if it was her real body, then he would already be dead. In response, he says if she thinks that he is who he was at the beginning of training, then she has problems, and tells her to return to her body and wait for him. So he completed all the stages of training of hellish complexity, and receives rewards for passing. They begin to move him, which he rejoices, thinking that it's time to start pumping. Returning to Earth, the hero does not recognize the place where he got to, and decides to check the time. He is shown the date January 17th, 2022, 10 minutes past 5, which makes it clear to him that he has been in the maze of choice for 3 months. He did not think that he would disappear for so long, and decides to first find survivors and assess the situation. We are transported to the Seoul High School, where a group of people gathered, headed by a police officer Odiso. They ask him how long they are going to stand here and whether they will die because of this. But he answers that there is a day left for the dungeon to be cleared, after which one of the people begins to panic, saying that clearing an E-rank dungeon is not as simple as in the game, and if he has a lot of lives, it does not mean that they have to. He understands that everyone is scared, but despite this, they must go to the dungeon because the dungeon will soon begin to break. Dungeon rift is a phenomenon during which the number of monsters in a dungeon increases rapidly, and they get out of it. When a rift occurs, the portal turns red, and the dungeon's rank begins to rise slowly. This is exactly what is happening now in the school. The dungeon in it has already experienced one such rift, and its level has begun to rise to D rank. The problem is that the people here are not able to cope with such complexity. They only raided the F rank dungeon. If his rank rises to D, that's the end, says the policeman. They have a chance only now, there simply won't be another one. Trader Gong Jaiwan asks why the dungeon is being pumped at such a speed, although the rest are still F rank. Diso answers that it's the undead, zombies are most often encountered, and it's not strange that everyone was surprised because no one thought that they were in this game either. He goes on to explain, as directly unlike other mobs, a zombie bite infects instantly. It's like in the movies, moreover, they can turn even corpses to their own kind. And the school that was once already a dungeon, and the innocent children who studied here, were helpless before the attack of the dead. They have lost many, and families, and loved ones with friends you can list endlessly, but the man urges them to fight. Fight to protect their home, those they love, and themselves from these monsters about the changed world. In this dungeon world, it's not homework, but a catastrophe that destroys lives. The policeman knows that the plan is crazy, but we need to take care of the survival of people and let them not have a top ranker in the group, but there is Choi Hannah. After that, they all enter the red portal, and we are transported to the Ifug apartments. They show us a lot of dead people and our hero closes his eyes to one of them. With thoughts that he should find people, he wandered around the city and came across a red portal that was considered the most dangerous. The color of the portal reflects the state of the dungeon. Blue is light, green is normal, but red, where the number of mobs is increased, indicates the beginning of a rift. It will happen when the portal turns black, and Ki checks the time of the portal before it turns black. It was written that there were 24 hours left before the break, and next to the portal, the hero found still warm coals and understands that there were recently people who entered the portal. And abruptly, the time before the break begins to accelerate. In the game, when the time before the break begins to accelerate, monsters appear often and in large numbers, destroying the latter. If it's the same here as in the game, then the guy is sure that a rift will happen soon. Thus, the people inside will not last long, and you need to find out why the time accelerated, after which K entered the portal. The structure of the dungeon varies depending on the level. There is nothing remarkable in the F-ranked ones, but the E-ranked ones make objects inside themselves several times larger than a person. The phenomenon in which items inside the dungeon increase is called expansion. Entering the dungeon, he sees an enlarged version of the class where he looks like a cockroach. The whole class can fit at one table. The E rank is completely different from F. He cannot relax his vigilance because of the low level, and immediately a lively skeleton appears in front of him, possessed by a cursed spirit of the 40th level. Our hero takes a strong sword in his hands and begins a battle with him. To destroy the skeleton, you need to find its weak point, that is, the core as in a golem. The skeleton has a core in the neck, and the guy knocks the skeleton down and finishes it in the neck. After that, he raised the level and enjoyed the sound of raising the level since he hadn't heard it for a long time, having achieved the maximum levels last time. Immediately after the defeated skeleton, the rest appear and a task called Master of Surprise Attacks is created for K, in which you need to make 100 surprise attacks. He easily copes with the horde of surprise attacks and completes tasks by receiving the title of Master of Surprise Attacks, and for him it's just a gold mine to pump up. Noticing the skeletons still killed, he realizes that they were not killed by him, but by a group of people whom he followed, and decides to postpone pumping and go save them. An hour before, a group of people were fighting monsters and coping well with the help of a policeman and Hannah, but suddenly someone snapped his fingers and an explosion occurred. Diso notices two people in green capes and masks. They didn't look like mobs because they are very strong to appear in an E-rank dungeon. Unknown people warn that there is no point in hiding, but despite this, the man decides to split up in order to save as many people as possible. As a result, they split up and the policeman notices that they are aiming at the strongest player in the group and it is very dangerous. But one of them immediately catches up with him. The man reacts and attacks, but does not hit, and in the end they are left alone. The masked man addresses the detective by name, which means that he knows him, and this surprises Diso. And immediately after that, the mask attacks the detective, but he withstands, realizing that the masked man is playing with him. The policeman has a Wave Rider spear in his hands. This is a reward for disabling the server, but with a level limit. At least his power alone makes him effective, and the man decides that the opponent needs to be wounded, otherwise he will lose. According to the skill, it is clear that the masked man is a high-level boss and therefore very dangerous. The detective attacks the enemy and is sure in the vicinity that he does not use an explosion next to him, but the masked man tells the man that he is very predictable and makes an explosion near him, which throws Diso away. The detective hits the machine and gets damaged and realizes that he is powerless against such an opponent. In turn, the masked man says with a satisfied goal that he has slowed down in strength since their last meeting. The policeman begins to recognize the voice and remembers one criminal who was a defenseless woman in the past. To which the person reacts with joy that he finally remembered him, and it was the famous serial killer Hwang Dong-soo who was sentenced to death. The demon who killed 7 people, the one who was almost overstrained, arrested 8 years ago by our detective, became a player. So all those who were with him now are ex-prisoners. This is the worst possible scenario for the development of events. Diso couldn't believe that such a person could become a player, and there were no survivors on his side. The criminal says that there is no hope of salvation and his people killed all the others from the detective's group and is going to finish off Diso. Suddenly, a wall explodes behind them and a young man comes out of it, who is our hero. Kay finally found a man, but he can't understand why one of them is wearing a mask, but he understands that they fought. The detective shouts for him to run away because the masked man is very dangerous, and the criminal is going to kill our hero by gathering strength at the tips of his fingers for a new explosion. And blows up the guy. But the explosion did not touch Kay and he realizes that his opponent is a serial pskar and picks up a durable sword and starts attacking. Serial pskar, aka Red Player, is a person who constantly kills other players. There are only 3 lives in Dreamside, so such people were considered villains and even the developers perceived them as a cancer. In the past, Kay almost failed a raid because of one of these players and believes that such should be taken out immediately. Seeing a mountain of corpses, he realizes that they did not die from mobs, but from a masked man. The criminal asks not to meddle in their affairs and will let him leave if he leaves right away, but the detective manages to warn the hero that this is a famous serial killer. The guy heard about him from the news and decides to end it, saying that he does not leave his enemies alive. Activating the danger detection and the dragon's eye goes on the attack, noticing a dark aura over the criminal. It was another pskar that he destroys by receiving the Durable Top award. After that, he turns to Dong-soo and says that with great power comes great responsibility, and he should take his responsibility. The fact is that the explosions occurred due to arson and gas, but these were the skills of 2 people, not 1. Changing weapons, he throws it in the direction of the criminal, and but flies next to the person standing behind him. This person imposed isolation, on top of all this, which increased the safety of the masked man. Another criminal is defeated and the oak staff is received as a reward, and immediately attacks the latter, who asks to wait, but he did not wait when he killed. He uses arson, but he does not succeed and our hero, returning the dagger to his hand, attacks and finishes off the criminal. He gets a level because the system recognized them as mobs and dungeon grass, and Kay abruptly understands why they were in a hurry and decides to do the same. The policeman says that Hwang Dong-soo killed his sister in the past and thanked him for saving him. He asks the hero for a favor and brings him up to speed. They found out that there were 10 enemies and they had to split up. The man asks to save people and Clark's shooter, who is Choi Hana. Kay is surprised by this information since no one knew that the male shooter would turn out to be a famous idol. Heading to another group of people to help, they discuss the shooter and would never have believed that in fact this is a girl who is famous all over the world as an idol. 12th place Clark, he was given the nickname Magic Revolver Shooter for his skill with weapons, when it comes to shooting he has no equal. Who would have thought that such a girl would spend so much money on donations, which the policeman does not understand, since he has not entered the games for a long time and did not understand what kind of donations. However, going to help, they took the bodies of criminals so that the mobs did not touch them, and it worked, which the heroes are happy about and cannot linger. Since it was not possible to pick up their inventory, they decided to use their abilities and buffs, which remain active a day after death. When they reach the gym, they find out that there are 3 hours left before the dungeon breaks, which makes it clear that someone is speeding up time. The grass from the dungeon does not sell well in stores, but it speeds up the time to break very well. The method is simple: you need to create a flower by mixing grass and water from the dungeon. Although it is strange since water will fall out of the dungeons of B rank and higher. This means there is a person among the criminals who has been playing for long enough to get a reward for disabling the server. Most jailbreakers were unable to hack the server after it was closed. It turns out it's someone else. Our hero hopes that Hannah is okay. Meanwhile, the girl fights and dodges various attacks, stones and arrows. In addition to a large mob, it is attacked by criminals behind it, which greatly hinders it. The big mob turned out to be an E-rank boss named Death Knight Vondis. A huge, dark knight with a skull-shaped head with horns and a sword in his hands. The Death Knight has incredible stats and terrifying defense. He attacks Hannah and she manages to dodge, and the mob immediately strikes the next blow, but the girl dodges again. It's clear from the title that he only uses swordsman techniques that are easy to predict, the girl thinks. She deals damage at a distance, and therefore such an opponent is the best for her. But the problem is that criminals are shooting at her whom the Death Knight does not touch. She asks them how they can shoot at such a beautiful girl like her, and thinks how they manage to remain unnoticed by the boss. She promised to kill them all, even though these people are players, real people, and she can't shoot them. From the roar of the boss, she can concentrate, and turns to Clark inside herself. Taking himself in hand, he thinks out a plan and begins to act. Firstly, the enemy in front, namely one of the criminals. By shooting at them, she hits the head of one of them. Not for nothing is she wounded. After killing one of them, she gets the item, poison potion, but the boss continues to destroy the area and soon there will be nothing left. The girl looked at her stats and noticed that her health was decreasing despite her evasion, which means reality is too real. She also finds out that there are 3 hours left before the break, and with her level in such a short time, she will not be able to cope with the boss. She has only one way out, running away from him. She shoots straight at the boss's head and the boss is unconscious for 5 seconds. She immediately activates the blood sphere ability and collects a huge sphere near the muzzle of the gun. The boss woke up and swung his sword. The girl jumped on the sword, ran to the hilt, and jumped over the boss. She bled from the nose due to the fact that the body is weak for the bloody sphere, and will not stand for a long time. She should finish him off with one shot, but missed, hitting only one of the horns. The boss starts to counterattack and the girl thought that her end, and at that moment a barrier appears for 3 seconds made by Kay, who saved her. Kay rescued her and asks if she is okay, to which the girl cannot answer due to shock. Suddenly, the boss gives a strong roar, changing into a more huge red mob. It was an evolution to D rank and now there is no chance of winning, the girl thought. After leveling up, the boss needs time to adapt, which gives them a chance to escape. She tells them to prepare to retreat, because it is impossible to kill him. And the criminals have disappeared, but it's better to meet them running away than to fight the boss, Hannah decides. At this moment, Kay takes a step towards the boss, intending to attack him. The girl grabs him and asks what he's going to do. He even has a conventional weapon, it's suicide. But it doesn't bother the guy, so at least he can detain the boss. He asks to borrow a spear from the detective, which he does not mind, but it is for the 80th level. A level 80 item, a magic spear that creates waves that amplify damage. If the level of the user does not match it, it will not manifest itself to the full and will remain sealed. Taking the spear in his hands, it is activated, and the girl understands since he has awakened the spear, then his level is above the 80th. If you remember how he protected her with a barrier and was able to grab her despite the fact that she used a bloody sphere, the girl concludes that this guy is a high-level player. He gives Hannah something to sing and goes to attack the demon Lord Vondis. He attacks the boss with a spear, he reflects the blow. Using the dragon's eye, the hero finds out that the core is still in the same place as before, namely on the neck. Using the spear technique, Rolling Waves attacks again, which the boss with a heavy burden reflects. K realized that the boss can't resist the abilities yet, he still needs time to adapt. He is now the weakest of the D-rank bosses. They have a chance to defeat him, and a hail of shots from Hana falls sharply. Approaching the guy, she wonders who she is and where he got the high-damage drug from. Our hero does not reveal himself to her and asks her to hurry up with a shot at the boss, which he was going to do without his requests. After the shot, she immobilized Vondis for 3 seconds. This is enough for a single sure blow of K's spear. He aims his spear at the boss's core with the Ferocious Waves technique. Launching a spear, he hits the core and destroys it with the power of the spear. They defeated the D-rank boss of the Demon Lord Vondis. They are starting to get levels because they have cleared the D-rank, Fallen School, dungeon. There is a group of criminals waiting at the exit who want Choi Hana dead because she is the only one who can interfere with their plans. But she does not come out for a long time and they begin to consider her dead, since she does not have the 80th level to defeat the boss. But an alert window appears in front of them where it says that the dungeon has been cleared, and the rift has been cancelled. In this dungeon, monsters will appear in limited numbers, and the rift will not happen without a special event. The leader of the group looks at the smartphone where it says that the blacklist has disappeared from the maze of choice, and they retreat. We return to our heroes, where Kay gratefully gives the spear back. Hana approaches and admiringly asks him if he is Kay, to which our hero responds positively, but in the end they do not believe him. The detective says the guy's abilities are admired, but the number 1 runner has left the maze of choice. He was informed about this in the morning, and even if so, it is impossible that he came out of there, and immediately came here during the breaking of the dungeon. The chance of such a coincidence is negligible, and it seems so to the girl. She came here only to meet with Kay, and there are stories about places that never became dungeons, but it is unknown who is behind it. That's why she thought that Seo Jun is Kay, but it's just a misunderstanding, but our hero is in a misunderstanding why they don't believe him. She apologizes for not thanking him for saving her at first. In turn, he offers to look for survivors, to which she agrees. In an abandoned school pantry, they find the rest of the group, who are more or less in order. The detective is glad that most survived despite what happened. The survivors apologize for not being able to help, but Daisa forgives them, and is glad that they were able to survive at all. Kay is watching this and is also glad that people were able to survive all this, and as a result, the players will become stronger. And let the detective think that he will not be useful, but our hero thinks otherwise. One survivor girl asked Choi Hana how she feels and is she okay? She said she was fine, although she messed up a little, but it didn't matter. The detective approaches the guy and says that now everyone can go to the camp and wants Kay to join too. So they went back to the camp after the dungeon. Along the way they destroyed the mobs they came across. People were not surprised by Hana's abilities, but the guy surprised them very much with his abilities. They come to Banjo 3 station. Since all the monsters outside are F rank, they got out of the dungeon during the rift. Therefore, if they used to live in small spaces for a long time, then they will not enter the same ones here, Kay reflected. Maybe people accidentally chose this place, but the location is good. Everyone greets the group very happy that everyone is safe. Everyone is very happy to see Diso and run up to meet him. They respect and love him very much. An elder approaches them and offers to rest and eat, to which they agree. The policeman says that the guy should sit down to rest, and he will bring him food in the meantime. Our hero sits down and thinks about everything that is happening today, and begins to feel tired and pass out. But he cheers himself up sharply because you can't lose vigilance, and decides that now is a great time to check the rewards for defeating the boss. He already assumes that there is, and decides to check it out. The first is the weapon, namely the Blade of Regret of Vondis. The blade filled with regret of Vondis, who died without committing retribution, has a unique ability, can cover the blade with ice. 120th level is needed for use, has 175 damage and class B. The guy lacks a level even if he uses all the stat points he has collected. In the case of a level restriction, the user will need to add stat points, which means that in total one will have to equal 600. And the detective could use a spear, although he did not have the 80th level. Does this mean that a small discrepancy is permissible? Our hero asked this question. Then there was a book. It was bright red and with a lock since it is impossible to use without access. The damage was 0 and the class L. But it was because of this book that our hero came to the dungeon, and it was a legendary item. K will try to open it and use it in the future. And the last reward was an animal that pleased the hero in the first part of Dreamside. Touching him, Goran woke up as written by the will of the owner. Since he constantly said Goran, that's what they called him, the animal Goran. Waking up, Goran was catastrophically hungry. It was necessary to provide him with food, so Goran was happy with the smell of delicious food. His behavior was strange. There can only be one reason for this. This is a dungeon. The fact is that this is not his true form. Now he is in the form of a squirrel. But his true form is a dragon, a monster devouring dungeons. Or just Gregory's monster. The problem is his reaction being in the camp, and it's not about people or food, it's about skeletons. Some mobs could be released during the dungeon break. Skeletons are E-rank monsters with a small amount of intelligence, which means there are only two options. Either something is wrong with the Goran, or something strange is happening here, and the Goran meanwhile shows the owner that he is hungry. That's the whole minus of the fact that he specializes in smells. It's unclear what exactly attracts. He notices a man who is beginning to mutate, and he is on the verge of going. After a while, the detective gathered people to discuss the cases. He said that they needed to kill the skeletons, which surprised everyone. It would be dangerous. The dungeon was closed. People assumed that if they hid, the monsters would leave. But that's the point. Diso tells people, since the skeletons have started to disperse in different directions, many people will die because of them, and for them this is a chance to pump. Monsters are dangerous because of the dungeons, because they get the blessing of the dungeon buff from them, but now they are weak. Besides, it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the sun is at its peak height, at this time the dead are weakest. The detective does not force anyone to risk their lives and go with him, so they have the right to decide for themselves. As a result, 2 groups were created, a detachment of hunters and a detachment of camp guards, our hero together with hunters, as well as Diso and Hannah. Kay can't miss such a chance to pump, besides, he needs to find something. The detective offers to introduce himself as there are newcomers among them. He starts talking about Diso and tells that he is a policeman and does well in close combat. Then Gon Jaiwan, who used to be a salesman, and now he will fight with all his might. He introduced himself as in a new class. Then there was the Battle of Hannah, who said her level and that was it. Since everyone already knew her, there was no need to introduce her, especially since it was impossible to reveal all the cards at once. Then there was Chang Hyan, a swarthy and arrogant guy, in low-rank golden armor. He told everything about himself without hiding anything. The last one was our hero, and Diso began to introduce him, and as soon as he wanted to say a word, an arrogant guy gets in with a laugh and recognizes our hero by calling his full name in reality. Kay didn't recognize him, and wondered if they were familiar. The fact is that they were from the same school, and during school our hero was bullied, and hyenas laughed at him and told him to stick with him if he wanted to be whole. Laying his hand on his shoulder, the dark-skinned guy wants to remember the old, but Hannah intervenes with indignation, saying how dare he treat him like that, and that only thanks to him they are all alive. And orders to apologize to him, but the people in the group ask to find out the attitude is similar. After that, our hero still introduces himself and says that he is K, the player of the first place in the ranking. This news surprised everyone very much except Hannah and Diso. They suspected something like this and were only delighted. Hannah's eyes just sparkled, and the old man just looked younger. But Hyena claims that this is a lie and that K was this boy causes him to laugh wildly, but notices a t-shirt that falls out for defeating Boss Vondis. He decides that he needs to be exposed because he does not believe in what has been said. The blonde guy asks K about his level and he answers the 37th. But the guy in the gold equipment again does not believe and considers it a lie and adds that K was not Korean. After a while, on the street, the group began hunting skeletons and using the dragon's eye. Our hero told everyone who and where he was. After they met the horde and the fight began, Diso went to the front, Hannah covered them, and as soon as K wanted to join the fight, hyenas slowed him down and began to show how professionals fight. The sight was terrible. but due to the fact that when he helped Kay earn money a long time ago at school, since he did not know the cost of the products that he asked him to bring at lunch, he gave a lot of money and the guy kept the change for himself. So our hero forgives him his quirks and went to do more important things. He started feeding Goron monsters so that he ate and opened his skills, but he still didn't get his hopes up. But suddenly he smelled something strange in the southwest. Kay ran there, but there were just skeletons that Goron wanted to eat. So it began to get dark and the dead were soon to get a buff. Many thanks to the sword were able to raise their levels. The detective had a groove that they were making progress, but could not figure out what Kay was doing. Kay was sitting angry at Goron who was still eating. Suddenly Goron smelled a buffet nearby, from which his eyes changed. Most likely, this is what the guy was looking for, after which he approaches Days and says that before returning, you need to go somewhere. They went to a flower shop where they found an incredible stench and an E-class dungeon. Garden of Death. The task of the dungeon. Eliminate the virus. Difficulty E. The conditions were to eliminate the King of Flowers, which spreads virus spores through the Garden of Death. The time to complete 30 minutes, the reward for passing the flower bud of the King of Flowers, and the last in case of failure, a rift will occur. In the window it was also written that the virus spores cause the disease of the dungeon, and a request to check the NPCs in the nearest city. Also the initial fault has already occurred in the dungeon, and a request to beware of infection. It was to this that Goron reacted in the camp, and that sick man's face turned red and his fingers darkened because of this dungeon. There are various dungeons in Dreamside, common as an abandoned school, inhabited by goblins and the dead. Themed, decorated in a certain style, and gardens of death, where motionless mobs flowers live. When a rift occurs in the latter, it releases not mobs, but virus spores. There are many symptoms that a person has become infected. For example, when a virus enters the body, it becomes a deadly parasite that turns people into monsters. Kay immediately realizes that the people at the banjo station are like gaming NPCs. The virus will affect all non-players who have no resistance, but with players with E-class resistance, everything should be fine. And our hero decides to destroy the virus so that it does not destroy anyone. But it's getting dark and the mobs will become stronger, but it's impossible to leave the dungeons anymore, since the portal is already red, and if the dungeon turns into a D rank, then not only they, but also the people in the camp will be in danger. As a result, it included 4 of the group, namely Kay, Hannah, Diso and Hyan. They decided to conduct a small raid, and the best players were sent to the dungeon, and the rest to the camp. Our hero was sure that he, Hannah and Diso would be enough for this, but 4 people were needed to enter and therefore Hyena was taken. He has equipment with a good level of protection and he himself is of a high level. However, Hyenas believed that the weak link of the group was Kay and offered to come back and take someone stronger. Hyena decided to take an apple by starting to invent fairy tales that this is an apple of half the land, and it's a great thing to replenish Manhwa, and wanted to eat it when suddenly Hannah shoots at the apple warning him to watch the surroundings, and there were thorns above it. The detective realizes that he made a mistake and chose Hyena. When they reached the greenhouse, they found the boss of the dungeon, and his name is King Sayatov. It looks like a sunflower, because this flower often witnesses human death. Experienced players call him a podsmertnik. And when they overcome it, they will be able to get a flower bulb as an antidote. If you grind and make a tincture of it, you will get a cure for the disease of the dungeon. They are going to use it to cure the sick at the banjo station. This is their only hope to save the sick people in the camp. Hyena asks to trust him, but no one listens to him because of the terrible smell from the King of Flowers. And suddenly he will attack without giving a sign, but everyone successfully evades, after which Hannah starts shooting, and Hyena pushes Kay away and goes forward. But Kay takes him by the cloak and pulls him back, saying that he looked under his feet where the part of the king was and could eat him. Using the dragon's eye, he understands that to get to the king, you need to cross the field, but if you take a step forward, the flowers will pounce on them like piranhas. Diso says that there is no choice and you will have to rely on Hannah, but it's too long and the monster will have time to become a D rank. If she enters the state of the blood sphere after receiving buffs from them and increases the area of damage with magic bullets, only then will she be able to defeat them all. Hannah tells Kay that she can handle herself if he gives elixirs and asks if he has them, to which he responds positively. But he does not give her, and she is furious about it, But he just wants to do everything himself because today he did not really pump his level, and this is very important. He rushed through the field and the flowers began to attack him, and with just one circular swipe he destroys them all, from which the hyenas are in great shock, but Diso and Hana are not surprised, because they know and believe that he is the K. Our hero understands that there are only two options: either his level is actually very high, or he uses an unbalanced ability. He takes the sword with both hands and strikes a strong vertical blow and destroys the plant, from which Hana and Diso are pleasantly delighted, and Hyena completely drooped from shock. After that, our hero receives 3 levels and a flower bulb award, and a spiked Kakashi glove. Going to the camp, Kei examines the glove. The description was that it was made of the body and thorns of the King of Flowers. Its weakness is fire. The unique ability spikes and required level 80, damage 120 and class A. This loot was better than he thought. This glove has the ability spikes. So if necessary, she turns her hand into a kind of short sword. Thanks to the heavenly body skill, I have no restrictions in using weapons, so the glove will come in handy. In addition, our hero has raised 10 levels since he passed the training. At the 32nd level, he defeated monsters of D and E levels, so with the number of points he collected during 90 days of training and with his skills, he will soon be able to easily clear D-rank dungeons, thereby building a clear line between himself and other players. Turning to Hyena. He mumbles something to himself, completely lost in himself, and Kei decides not to get involved. Approaching the camp, the group notices that there was a battle, and there were a lot of corpses and skeletons. Running into the camp, they call people, but no one responds. They notice steps and they all lead in different directions, as if they were walking back and forth. There are no signs of skeletons, which means that the disease is progressing. The dungeon has already been cleared. How did the virus spread, when suddenly there were screams and requests for help? They find a person and give a potion, but it cannot be used on purpose, and revival potions are required. This is a system warning of death. His legs are in a terrible state, his nerves are torn. Without a revival potion, this guy cannot be saved. They gave him paralysis potions to suppress the pain, so that he would tell what happened. He says that everything happened suddenly. A huge monster appeared on the stairs. The Mu were preparing to take him to the traps outside, as they had trained, but danger was waiting behind. People started turning into zombies and attacking us. If we had a healer with us, we could heal him and not have to worry about the virus. However, there are no healers at Banjo Station. He cannot be helped. One of the people has become a monster. Is this really the 3rd stage of the dungeon disease? Kei thinks. The first stage ends with a change in the color of the fingers and chills, but after a while a person turns into a zombie and attacks others, getting into the 2nd stage. Only when he has fully become a monster does he enter the 3rd stage. The Garden of Death was already cleared, but the 3rd stage came so quickly. Although the symptoms had just begun to develop, something contributed to this. The man posthumously asks to save these people, and after dying he was put down and the group gathered to clean up the station. Hana asks if he is aware that if the transformation has occurred, the person can no longer be cured. That he knew. Those who could not survive the disease of the dungeon are lying here, and the rest have gone along the paths, hoping that they manage to get out. The detective told everyone to take one, but Kei deals with them alone, after which Diso pretends that he didn't say anything. They reach Sinpun Station. It's a ghost station. It became abandoned when the plan to build the 10th line failed. There are fresh tracks at the station and they lead in different directions, and most likely they went to the Endinpo station. Initially, the group planned to go there in an emergency, and they will get there along the tracks walking along the paths. Kei noticed the monster's gaze and rushed forward to meet the monster, repelling his attack. The detective recognized the monster, and it was one of the people from the camp, a yellow-haired girl who stopped being a person. She will have to be killed, and for her murders they will get experience and items. This is the outcome of the dungeon disease. It turns people into monsters. Because of her, thousands of people died in the first dream side, but this time the fate of the whole world is at stake. Our hero promises to finish with her quickly, and without any pain, and you need to manage in one blow.